Mate, we met when I was not, or you saw me play when I was must have been 18, and then
Yes, upper six.
yeah, upper sixth, and then
Yeah.
we
So
didn't start.
yeah, you were the first player I ever spotted when I started this agent journey. It
Yeah,
was grammar school at Leeds versus Barnard Castle. It was the newly formed Champions Trophy.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah,
And as I was a university student in Leeds, it just sort of got onto my radar. I think it was one of the school rugby channels, blogs, basically posted all of the fixtures. And I
yeah,
basically looked around the ones in and around Leeds, and thankfully, yeah, grammar school at Leeds was still in. And yeah, you were the first player that I spotted. You just caught my eye just with your kicking, and I was like, okay, right, I need to sort of watch you more. But to sort of go through that journey with you from a schoolboy, because you're a part of the Newcastle Falcons Academy at that point.
yeah,
But to sort of see you go through that and help you through Championship, then into France, it's quite a journey, but I think that's quite special as well. Because yeah, when I first started on the journey of trying to be a sports agent, rugby was a sport that I sort of found my way into. So it was yeah, it's quite special to have been through that with you.
yeah, yeah. Awesome. We've got straight into it, but who are you? What do you do? And what is your journey? Obviously, you mentioned there you were at Leeds. Your journey to where you are now and how you support people now.
Yeah, so I'm Marco Pollecoff. So I describe myself as a sports agent, and in my current role, I cover two elements to being a sports agent. My main full-time job now is as a commercial sports agent. So that's focusing on sponsorship partnerships between brands and rights holders. So if you are a professional football team and you're looking for a new front of shirt sponsor, the company I work with at MSN, that's what we specialize in. But partnerships can range from, yeah, automotive partner, a banking partner, a hydration partner. There's all varieties of partnerships in sport now, which is fantastic. And then from the other side, handling a select group of professional rugby players, um, negotiating their employment contracts with professional rugby clubs across mainly the UK, France, and Italy.
Awesome, awesome.
What's
And
the sorry? What was the other bit?
the first question I wrote down is and you mentioned it there, but I suppose maybe more specifically, how do you support players in their journey as you supported me for 7, 8 years?
Yeah, great question. So it all starts from typically it starts from identifying a player. So when I was doing a lot more scouting, it would be going to academy games, it would be going to university matches, even going to championship matches. Just trying to get out there, watch more rugby, try and find talented players that I feel I could help.
Mm.
So the main role of a rugby agent is to ultimately negotiate and source employment contracts. So wherever they play rugby union and they pay players to play, I've got to try and find contracts there. That is the main bread and butter of what we do, is to make sure that our guys get contracts. Obviously, we can't force a club to take a player or anything like that, but we want to at
Yeah,
least try and help promote players. I think that's one of the big elements of this job is promoting players to clubs. Obviously, within the rugby world, as you probably know, like on the outside, it might seem a big world, but actually, it's much smaller once you're actually in the game. Players know coaches from when they're at school, from their academy days, ex players that they played against. Like you can usually find references quite easily. But our aim is just to promote players that clubs are in need of. So when we speak to clubs sort of around recruitment, this is actually probably the time now when we're having this conversation. Clubs will say to agents, we're looking for these positions, this kind of age profile, and then it's our job to promote our players essentially to them. And when they're interested, negotiate the best possible deal for them. Um, Outside of that, you could then say that you support players with sort of off the field matters. So if you're a player that has a commercial appeal, we would look at endorsement deals, whether that's with like a kit boot provider, your Nikes, your Adidas, Under Armour, those types of brands. If you're like an England international or just a senior international, then you might start to interest other companies, banking providers, hydration partners like sort of Lucozade, for example, and then other little bits and bobs, speaking engagements, that type of thing. And also, you try to assist the player with just managing their sort of day-to-day life and how they find going through being a professional rugby player, in terms of like dealing with feedback, dealing with coaches, especially if they're young players. They've gone from school where they might be very popular with their teammates, their coaches. They are arguably at the top of their game. People know them. Their identity is they're a good rugby player. And then when you go into the real world, it's a case of starting at the bottom and working your way up.
Yeah.
And so for this example, we can say academy players. It's trying to help them go through sort of the initial period of settling in. I think some young players may struggle with having been arguably like the big dog at school to then being like, no, you're sort of bottom of the pile. You've got to work extra hard. You've got to prove yourself. There are players, experienced players in the squad ahead of you, and what you've got to find a way of getting into that squad. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I'd probably say with academy players, it's about being a sponge, trying to soak up as much information as possible from coaches, from teammates, from players, especially players in your position. I think it's important to get along with players in your position, especially older players who hopefully, typically I've not come across too many teammates that are not unhelpful, but you want to get along with them to see if they can pass down some knowledge to you as you're trying to sort of find your feet in the game, which I'm guessing you may have found at clubs that you played for.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly. All of that, mate. It's quick, very quick learning curve. Yeah. I'm interested, especially with the scout bit you mentioned at the start. Um, you obviously pick up players who don't get contracts from the bigger clubs. Obviously, those guys
Mm,
too, but there's a band of players who probably just miss out. I'm
yeah.
interested, and I'm probably fall into that category early on at like 18.
Mm,
Is that something you've learned to identify those players? Like, is it intuition? Is that something you've learned through your own sport experience? Like, how have you developed that?
yeah, I think it's just watching lots of games and sort of building an intuition. And one of the beauties of sports is everyone's got an opinion. So I can, having gone to watch academy games, there'll be players that will catch my eye that, as you say, fall into that crop of players that don't quite earn a contract, as there's only a handful of contracts being offered at the end of the seasons. But it's always good to speak to them anyway,
Mm,
just to sort of get an idea of where they're at with their rugby. Some players, playing academy rugby was fantastic. It was the peak of their rugby careers probably, but they were just naturally talented, and it wasn't necessarily a career that they want to go into.
mm,
So sometimes those conversations can sort of just be, thanks for reaching out, but I'm just looking to go to university and then move into I guess a normal career, so to speak. But there are some players that fall into that crop of released players, and I would say a handful of them will go to university. So obviously, we're very fortunate in this country to have Buck Super Rugby, which I think is a fantastic platform. And I definitely recommend it to a lot of players, so long as they are comfortable with going into further education. Is to go put yourself forward for some of these Buck Super Rugby teams, go for trials, send clips to coaches, because I think it's a really good way for players that don't quite make the cut to have a few more years, arguably out of the spotlight. I know Buck Super Rugby does get attention, but it's not the same level. So I think it's good that those boys can go to university, get a degree, because as it's important to have something to fall back on. It doesn't have to be something that you necessarily will fall back on, but it's a case of, right, go to university, do a degree in a subject that you're actually interested in,
mm.
because it's 3 more years of studying, going to classes, doing essays. It's not just writing an essay the night before, handing it in, and you'll come out with a degree 3 years later. I mean, you can. It probably won't be a very good degree, but I think there's still structure going to university, which is really good. And actually, there's probably a handful of those young players as well that I would say could go abroad. So you could go to France and play in an Espoir academy, or you could maybe go to Italy and join a team out there, which is another good way to try and find your foot into professional rugby further down the line. That's probably a route I would say is good for young players that are considering maybe a gap year. So, maybe instead of going traveling, you could travel with rugby a bit and go to France, see what Espoir Academy is like, maybe learn a language, just give it a try for a season because you can always defer university by a year or two if you want to. So I'd like to think that, if a young player came to me, I'd be able to suggest some options for them. But ultimately, it's every player's journey is individual. So I've had plenty of players come to me and say, I can't do any more education. That's fine. An agent in my position can speak to the contacts I have abroad and see what people think of them.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And it leads me on to my next question. The opportunities for especially younger players, probably in that second cut, not the second cut, but just the boys and girls who miss out on the maybe the Premiership contracts or senior academy contracts. How has the opportunities changed, would you say, in the last 10 years? Notably, I went over to France and really enjoyed it and saw the opportunity over there. How has that changed from your perspective? Obviously, you've had experience with multiple players.
Yeah, I would say there's been some big success stories I've seen of players going over to Espoir academies in France specifically here, where they've just given that bit more time to develop. I think over the last 10 years, I would say that, quality players that, Premiership clubs might not necessarily see that at the time, but there's still been a decent conveyor belt of players going over to France. And I think ultimately, if you play, tight head, lock, those types of positions, which I guess you could say are premium in terms of clubs are always interested to see what English options or what British options, sorry, I can provide or other agents can provide. That's the area or those positions that really interest clubs. Obviously, clubs will look at a majority of positions. But I would say in terms of things changing, they're slightly stricter in France now, especially now we've left the European Union, but they're stricter on the sort of amount of foreign players you can have in US bar teams, which they obviously need to be seen to be bringing through more French players. So there's fewer foreign spots. So that's where I say you've got to have some quality about you or a decent amount of potential that a club goes, yeah, that would like to develop you for 2, 3 years. Because if you spend a certain amount of time in France, you can earn French eligibility, even though you might not be French or have a French passport. It allows you to be seen as a French player further down the line. So let's say you spend 3 years before your 21st birthday in France, it then can unlock the opportunity to be an Espoir player or an Espoir recognised player, which means that when a senior team comes in to sign you, you're not counted in the foreign quota because you spent a certain amount of time before your 21st birthday at a French academy, which is it's an interesting way to do things, I must say. But that's one of the main attractions for clubs bringing in overseas players to France is can we get them Espoir qualified?
Yeah.
And that really then unlocks French opportunities if you continue with your trajectory.
Yeah. And in the UK, around university rugby, we know that like Buck Super Rugby is just gone strength to strength. How have you seen
Yeah.
that develop? And again, like what opportunities you see for younger players getting into university setups like that?
Yeah, that's probably been one of the biggest positives I'd say of rugby union in this country is the
Mm.
development of Bucks Super Rugby. I mean, when I went to university, Bucks Rugby was just being formed in my final year, and just the level of quality has gone up and up and up. I think it's a fantastic development ground for young players. I think one of the beauties of rugby is a lot of the players do understand that careers are short, so they do need something to fall back on. And perhaps it's the upbringings they come from, but they are aware that they obviously have to apply for university in their final year of school anyway. But a lot more of players are open to going to university in the first place, and they
Mm.
might not necessarily see it as such a, I think failure is a really strong word, but that first opportunity to get a contract hasn't quite happened. You can go to a Leeds Beckett, a Hartbury, very, very good level of rugby. It's almost, I mean, I've not been in seeing it up close to person for a little while, but they're essentially like full-time programs. The amount
Yeah.
of S&C coaching they get, the support they get as players, nutritional with coach analysis, all that type of thing is gearing them up, hopefully, for a move into the professional game after university. But the standard is fantastic. I think it's a good place for players just to continue to develop, getting regular game time if they can, because ultimately, if you're a young academy player, you come in at 18, you're unlikely to walk straight into a senior team. So teams will send you out on loan, whether that is like National 2, maybe National 1. It's very much dependent on your position, your size, where your development's at. But you'll sign a senior academy contract with a Premiership team, and then you'll be shipped out on loan. So you're still going away to develop. That
Yeah.
doesn't change, but actually, players that go to Buck Super Rugby, go to university, get your degree, still play a good level of rugby. Some clubs have associations or relationships with universities anyway. I mean, Hartbury is a prime example with
Mm.
that you've experienced, and obviously they're very close with Gloucester, but the likes of Bath, they've got a really good relationship between the club and the university. So some clubs will offer contracts, and I think it may become more of a stipulation that if you sign a professional contract or professional, senior academy contract, you have to go to university or go to some form of education or additional, vocational training of some sort to continue development that helps you off the field and ultimately will give you a foundation to fall back on when your career comes to an end, whenever that might be.
Yeah. Yeah. I've loved watching how that league's grown and grown. And two questions come up. Firstly, with your commercial hat on, how is
Mm.
that developing? And you must see with the MSN that you're involved in, you must see huge opportunity, not just for the league to grow from a commercial perspective, not just the players. So, like, yeah, what do you see from that league as it grows?
I'd like to see, I'd love to see a TV deal potentially come in for it.
Yeah.
I think the way American sports run, NCAA sports are massive. They've got really big TV deals. I think it was this year that they actually brought out a college computer game. I think it's like a American football game, and like
Yeah.
that shows the levels of college, university sport, whatever you want to call it, how high it can get. Obviously, I don't necessarily think that will happen in this country, but I'd love to see a recognised TV station take Buck Super Rugby on, whether it is a case of one fixture a week. I mean, I know games are streamed on YouTube, which is fantastic, and I think they get really good views. But is it a case of Discovery potentially taking on, does Sky Sports take it on, does Premier Sport take it on? Because it's another way just to promote the game. And it is a high level of rugby. There's no question of it. You're getting good crowds. I think, as we both know, Bucks Wednesdays are a massive thing. So it's a spectacle, and I think it's exciting to have a look at players or arguably stars of the future and how they develop. Yeah, I don't think. I don't think you'd ever be disappointed watching a Buck Super Rugby game, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's class, isn't it? It's class to see it grow and develop, and it's only going to get stronger. This next question is just coming to me. So put yourself in like an 18-year-old's shoes. Obviously, you
Yeah,
support a lot of 18-year-olds, and you've got three options. You've got it would be hard to turn down a senior academy contract, right? So you've got
yeah,
senior academy deal, Prem Club, right? 3 years. Go to one of the best Bucks Super Rugby teams for 3 years,
yeah,
and then get a degree, or you have an opportunity. Maybe I wasn't maybe top 14 or Pro D2 Espoir gig.
yeah.
Which one would you pick?
I
That's the
think I think I'd have that is an extremely difficult question because I think I see benefits to all three of them, and I
yeah,
think I've obviously seen success stories of all three.
yeah,
Um, I think uh, I think it'd be hard to turn down a senior academy contract on
yeah,
the basis of, let's say, there isn't a degree associated to it.
yeah.
Just for this sake, I think, yeah, I think it'd be really hard to turn down a contract. But I think one key element to the decision would be looking at the senior squad and the players ahead of you or
Yeah,
ahead
for
of me,
sure.
sorry, in my position, because I
Yeah,
think ultimately, if a senior contract's put in front of me, then obviously I've earned the right to sign that contract.
yeah,
But if there's clearly a number of other players ahead of me, obviously there's senior players, there'll be, you know, two or three players ahead of me, but actually what's the group just in front of me, the other sort of senior academy players or players in their early 20s that might be blocking my pathway to the first team. I think that comes into play because if there's too many players ahead of me that I think I'm similar to, or, I'm in a position that they don't typically rotate a lot. I think it would be, it might be difficult to say, well, actually, I'll take the contract. Am I going to develop at a good pace? Obviously, look, everyone wants to develop quickly. There's no question of that. But
yeah.
am I going to develop at a pace that's going to, eventually see me in the first team in 2 to 3 years or
Mm,
4 years at a push?
yeah,
Whereas I think with Bucks Super Rugby, you're potentially going down a route that is maybe a little bit safer in terms of I would I would confidently say any player that gets offered a senior premiership contract, senior academy contract, will walk into any Bucks Super Rugby side. There's no
yeah,
question of it. So you're then in a position where you could play, 90% of their games as long as you stay fit, maybe 100% if you're
mm,
staying fit. So by the time you come out of that 3 year period, you're looking at how many games you play. I can't remember how many it is now. They've added teams, but let's say you're playing 40 odd games by the time you come out of those 3 years with cup games included. Or, would you have played that many matches if you'd gone out on loan to a Nat 2 South team or North, wherever the club's based? I think that's potentially something that you'd have to take into consideration. I would, having been to France, been to Italy now to see my clients, to check in on them, see how they're getting on, see what sort of towns they live in. There's also part of me that thinks, going out to France would be fantastic. Um, Again, it would have to be a longer term contract if I could secure one in France, just because, a lot of contracts over there are like 1 year, which is, is a good opportunity. A young player will be moving away from home for the first time.
yeah,
Not a lot of players would be able to speak French. So there's obviously a language element. I think we're very fortunate that a lot of France and Italy, a lot of coaches, a lot of players can speak English. They're taught English as a language a lot earlier than we are, which is a shame. I think if I could recommend anything to young players is take languages seriously. Learn
Do
French,
you see
learn some good.
French?
Do your GCSE French. I think it is very important. I'd even say, what, get yourself like a separate tutor, actually one that help you speak conversational.
Yeah.
French more than saying where you live and how many brothers you have and you play rugby to pass your oral exam. But no, I definitely say if you have an interest in potentially playing abroad, learn the language as soon as you can because it would really help when you settle in with teammates.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're someone that threw yourself in. You've always thrown yourself into things, so you picked
Mm.
up languages a little bit as well when you were out in France.
Yeah. Yeah. It says something when, lay those three options out on the table and it's still, there's still a discussion around it, right? And it brings to mind like going into Saints and listening to their partnership with Bedford. Like I think
Mm,
are nailing that because those academy
yeah,
boys are developing yes, they're senior academy boys, but the relationship and the game time that they get, it seems consistent. It seems like it's a real like
yeah,
collaboration, not just like chuck
yeah,
them out there to like say FC and off you go, It's like
yeah,
it seems very authentic.
yeah. I think Saints and Bedford have a really good partnership. I'd like I, you are starting to see more clubs having a relationship with a Buck Super Rugby
Yeah.
team at university level. So for those young players coming through, I think I just think there's a duty of care to players that obviously would like to go into further education. I mean, I've seen some boys and had clients in the past that have gone into university. They were never that strong academically, and they've done a year and they've gone, it's just not for me. And then it sometimes, unfortunately, puts the club in a bit of a sticky situation where they're like, well, the contract goes with the university degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then there's a discussion to be had around right, what is the solution to this? Um, Obviously, an agent. If a player has an agent at that point, you've got to try and work with the club, understand their position on it, speak to the player, speak to his family, his parents, what could be best for
Mm.
them. Um, I would, and that goes back to my point earlier around speaking to players about are you willing to do the work for university? It's
Yeah.
not just 3 years of going out having fun, as
Yeah.
much as we'd want it to be. You can have fun, don't get me wrong, but the course is still very important. It's not just, I can play rugby and whatever. You do have to take it seriously
Yeah.
because you've got to meet a certain grade or certain mark every year to pass the year, and having to resit and things, that's the last thing anybody wants to do. So again, that's where, in my role, if I can help, I would get involved at the earliest opportunity to make sure the players fully understands what option in those three scenarios they're signing up for,
Yeah.
so that they don't come back in a few months and go, oh, I wish I hadn't signed up to do psychology.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
It's really hard.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think from my own experience, if a player can generate habits and ways of working both for the university degree and in what basically is a full-time rugby program, I experienced that at Hartbury. If you can like nail them, you get skills that is going to help you if you do go into full-time rugby or if you're balancing maybe in a championship contract where you're doing part-time work, part-time playing. Um, and then obviously if you're in that position or if you're that minded and you're going to fully send it for your education, then also if you take the plunge and I don't want to say gamble, but there is a risk if you're
Yeah,
18 going to a Espoir team, then you're of that mindset. That being said, senior academies do enough, Marco, in your opinion, to
yeah.
help support the player? Because ultimately, yes, rugby, they're in the highest setup possible, right? Surrounded by, the role models and you're gonna learn so much. But in terms of like a human going to university and then experiencing the social side of it all and then managing studies if you're committed enough and then playing and then obviously learning language and having all the rule book thrown out with coaching and playing rugby, do,
Mhm.
do you see academies do enough?
I think they do a good job. I do. I think given the fact that they should have been working with players, I mean, I think the fact that they should have been working with the players for a few years, they
Yeah,
build relationships up with the schools in their catchments, which is, it's vital to basically keeping a conveyor belt of players coming through to the academies in the first place. I think they would do the due diligence of speaking to coaches and understand the right, what is this player like at school? Are
yeah,
they strong academically? Could they be good to go to university? do you think they'd slot into a professional environment? I think you've hit a really good point on mindset. I think that's where does the player back themselves in probably two of those scenarios in terms of do you back yourself to go to Espoir to prove people wrong if you've not secured a contract, or do you back yourself in that senior academy contract position and go, no, I want to fully focus on it, not have to worry about studying, which is fine as well. Like there's no, I think I would want to be very clear here. There's no right answer. It's down to each individual. Everyone's journey is unique to them. But it's a case for, I'd like to think academies to have done their research to go, okay, like we're going to offer this player a contract. We think he's in the right position. If we're going to offer them a contract alongside a university degree, we've spoken to their school coaches to get like reports on them academically to say, right, okay, they are suitable to do this. But I think, yeah, I think clubs are obviously working on helping players. They think more about life after rugby, even though it probably feels weird to them that they're just starting their rugby careers and they're already saying, right, what are you going to do after rugby? Because if you're lucky, you will have maybe a 10, 12 year career.
Yeah.
Probably less if you pick up injuries or have a little bit of a history of injuries sort of towards your later teens.
Yeah.
But I do think they're doing a good job, and I think the likes of the RPA do the best they can to try and help players with courses, educational lectures, and things like that about right. You're leaving school, you're now entering the world of professional rugby. These are all the elements you need to consider. They will do seminars on agents. They'll probably get advice on social media. They can get advice on finances and what could potentially come with a successful rugby career. I mean, overall, yeah, I'd say they're doing a good job.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, I mentioned just there around Bedford's collaboration with Saints, and I touched on being authentic. Authentic's a bit of a buzzword, but I suppose you're in the business of creating relationships, right? And working with people, and especially working with players. You're trusted, players trusting you to get the best deal possible, which sometimes the player is, it's in your hands in a way. In terms of being authentic and having people having so much trust in you, again, is that something that you've actively considered, worked on, created with players, or do you think it's something that is in your personality and in the role that you're in now, both as an agent and MSM?
I'd say I'd like to think just my personality and one of my strengths as an individual has always been to be a people, be good with people. Um, I think, yeah, you've got to be able to communicate well with your clients. I think if we're talking about young players, you've got to just be honest and transparent at the start to say that, this is not um, an easy career to have. And, the fact that an agent is reaching out to a young player doesn't mean, oh my God, they're amazing. They're going to suddenly go on to have a top premiership career, become an
Yeah,
England international and, what, I'm the big dog, I've got an agent. Like, we're there to try and help players. We're there to be honest with them. So we are going to be the ones that speak, tell them news they don't necessarily want to hear. And we've got
yeah,
to be, every agent I think will try to have a relationship with their player that they are able to give bad news and hard truths, because I think it's very easy for some people to tell players what they want to hear. Oh, you are the best thing, we've ever seen, blah, blah, blah. But it's more about, how can we help you really like develop? I think you learn um, more from your failures and sort of, constructive feedback. Like, don't take it personally. This is a career. This is business. Like, you've
yeah,
got to want to improve all the time, take on feedback, almost ask for feedback so that you can continually, improve. And I think the work that you do with mindset, I think that probably goes hand in hand with that. If you do think, well, how are you going to develop?
yeah,
Um, but I definitely think, yeah, from my strengths, it's, working well with people, um, especially with clubs, you've got to try and get along with all the clubs, because you can never burn bridges. The rugby world is small, so you never know when a player might become, head of recruitment or a coach moves, and there's so many moving pieces, and it's about just trying to maintain the best relationships you can with clubs, with players, um, to ultimately then be in a position to do the best for your clients when it comes to finding them contracts, and that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Um, we're in March at the moment, so
Yes.
it's getting to that point where, the lads who have been signed early have been signed and people are waiting. As an agent, and I speak to clients who are, waiting for an agent to call them back, or,
Yeah.
pestering, and um,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that experience out there. As an agent this time of the year, I suppose, what are you doing to get the deal? Not necessarily chase it, but what goes on as an agent at this time of the year? And I suppose, what would you be your advice to those players who are waiting, and what can be a really, really overwhelming and quite stressful time?
Yeah, I think this is um, the time of year where you probably speak to your clients the most that haven't found contracts. I
Yeah.
think, again, this is where when you start to build up um, relationships, and but you gain a better understanding of your clients, having hopefully worked with them for a few years, is that when it comes to recruitment time, right, is this individual someone that is potentially an overthinker, someone that worries a lot and is, messaging you on a daily basis. Some players are happy just messaging you once a week. Some are happy to, just wait for your phone call, and they can, just go about their daily life and focus on rugby. It's a real mix. There's, it's yeah, it's just understanding how your clients think. This is a very busy time of year. It's just about speaking to all the clubs, getting an understanding of what their recruitment needs are for next season, whether they still need any players. Obviously, a lot of re-signings will start before Christmas. If a club is wanting to re-sign you, that typically will get done before the new year, because they obviously don't want their players going onto the market and potentially another team snapping them up. So you're definitely seeing re-signings happening a lot earlier, which is good and bad depending on where you are with your clients. Whether that is a club coming to you saying, "Look, your client's doing really, really well. We want to get his new contract sorted ASAP." Um, if it's a player that's not got a contract for next year and is not being re-signed, then I can understand why players worry a bit about where their future lies, because we are coming towards the end of the season. There's not many games to go. Um, but it's a case of speaking to clubs as often as possible. And this always goes down to the relationships. When you speak to head of recruitment, directors of rugby, head coaches, it's just keep, picking on the phone up to them, just checking in, WhatsApping, emails, there's lots of moving pieces, and things are always changing. But ultimately, it's just making sure that you promote your players to the clubs that are looking for those positions, making the clubs that aren't in need of that position just aware of your client if an injury crops up. Um,
Mm.
One of the things I'd say with rugby, compared to football, look, I've worked in football, but obviously a lot of people are very aware of transfer deadline days and things like that. One of the things with rugby with the injuries and just the physical nature of the sport is, opportunities can come up at any point. Clubs mid-season could need players to come in on loan, or on short-term deals, maybe even like a month. So it's always good just to make sure that clubs are aware of your client. They have their CV, they have their highlights reel, they have references so that they can pick up the phone to someone, get an honest review on them. But yeah, it's a lot of just speaking to clubs as often as possible in a polite way, of course, not pestering them, and then also just speaking to your clients in a way that's just trying to reassure them that so long as you're doing your job, you know you push into the opportunity. As I said earlier, you can't force clubs to take your player.
Mm.
There unfortunately probably comes a point where your client might not get that next contract, and
Yeah.
it's being in a position where you might have to say to client, look, your run might be done.
Mm.
Um, Especially if you are potentially an older player coming towards the back end of their career. Clubs, as always, sports teams are always interested in new up and coming stars, so they can develop them, for the future. So you could take a 23-year-old instead of maybe taking a 33-year-old. But it's just communicating. I think communication is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Being on call for your clients when they need you, getting back to them as soon as you can, WhatsApp phone calls, because I can understand if players have got families, for examples, they've got mortgages, they've got kids, do they, is it a case of, right, we might have to move to the other side of the country? Do we then have to move the kids? Like there's a number of factors, but it's down to the client, the relationship you have with the client, and ultimately just continuing to promote your players as best you can so that when an opportunity arises, you're ready to move.
Yeah. This time of year, then your WhatsApp is stacked, is it?
It is. My phone's on mute at the moment. But yeah, it's pretty, it's, yeah, phone goes off quite a lot, but I understand, I've been in the business nearly a decade now, and I understand, I've learned just how players think. When I first started, it was, you kind of a bit taken aback, sort of how often some players want to message you. Like I did speak to you yesterday, but ultimately it's their future. And when you sign up to be, when you get sign up to be an agent, you get involved in this industry. We are, in my view, we're in the service industry. Like we approach you as a player, we want to help you. So we want to be on call when
Yeah.
you're worried, when you want to have a chat. Sometimes you just need to break it down and just say, look, when you've spoken to this English Premiership side, right, they've got, I'm aware of three other fly halves that they're looking at. You are one of three. If you're in a position from just asking around the industry and asking players, you might be able to find out exactly who those players are, and that might help a conversation with your players. But look, this player's played X amount of times for England, or this is an up and coming player. Sometimes that bit of information helps because it can then put the player at ease. Okay, right, well, I then understand why they might go for this player or they might go for this player. You
Yeah.
know, you can't you can't change a player's CV to make it sound any better. Like where that player is at that time is what you promote. Um, so it's not a case of maybe editing a highlight reel or anything like that. Clubs access all the games. They've got a team of analysts. They'll pull up your full matches. They'll speak to your coaches. They can speak to ex teammates. So it's sometimes just about trusting the process as best you can. And when I speak to players, I'm always saying to them like, every week is an audition.
Mm.
It's a case of showing your skill set. Because when it comes to recruitment time, your highlight reels help, but yeah, clubs want to see full matches. You've got to just be in a position where, ideally, as an agent, you've had a fully fit player that's played every week, and here is over 1,000 minutes of rugby you can go watch.
Yeah.
But we all know there's different levels with players, and they get injured, they fall out of favour, coach decides to rotate. There's so many factors in it. It's crazy, but yeah, ultimately, it's communication is the big thing for me.
Yeah. Oh, mate, I think that's going to be so insightful for a lot of people. At the start of their journey, midway through the journey, waiting for contracts. I think to hear it from, maybe a different perspective or someone who's in it, with current clients, I think that's been really interesting. I think you've given some great advice along the way as well. If you to give one piece of advice for someone like shooting for a pro career, maybe back into school or early on, do you have something in mind that you would say to anybody?
Um, yeah, I'd probably say um, always back yourself. I think in actually probably just in life, I think you've always got to back yourself, even if you're coming through as a senior academy player, always believe in your ability. Never be arrogant with that, but always believe that you can do the job. But I also think for young players, say in sixth form or who are about to leave school, is rugby doesn't last forever, as much as you may hear that from coaches, whether that's academy coaches, school coaches, maybe even your parents, is, just be realistic with how long a rugby career could last. We'd all love it to last forever. Players would all love to earn the big money. But unfortunately, that's not where rugby is and where rugby players' salaries are. So I think if you are in a position that university is a realistic option and you're open to that, I 100% recommend players do some form of degree, whether that is a part-time degree, like a distance learning, the Open University, where
Mm.
old ex-clients, having worked with, British and Irish Lions who have done Open University courses, and that's always good to fall back on if you can, tie in um, an opportunity to go to a Buck Super Rugby University alongside a senior academy contract. As I say earlier, if it's realistic for you, do it. I just think it's just good to have a sort of an insurance or a foundation to fall back on after. But yeah, I think ultimately it's just always back yourself, have confidence in your ability, and also trust the process of where your journey goes. Use the failures to motivate you to do better and to try and prove people wrong. Yeah, I always live by the mantra of always back yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, man. Like, I love the how much you're gonna bet on yourself. I love that at the moment. It's the same vein, which is I suppose tricky for some people, and that's what I'm supporting people in. Backing yourself and cultivating a mindset for that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
no, definitely. And I also think what you're doing is really good for players. I think if they are in a position to seek, um, I guess, independent support, that's
Mm.
worth it. I think mindsets everything in life, in sport, in business. Like, yeah, to do your best work, you've got to have a clear mind and clear vision of where you want to go. So,
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully players have supportive networks around them, coaches, parents, friends, teammates. But yeah, what you do, I highly recommend to players. Obviously not paid to say that or anything, but no,
No.
yeah, I think speaking to um, speaking to individuals like yourself, sports psychologists, etc., they really make a difference. So yeah, I definitely recommend it as well.
Awesome, mate. Appreciate it. I suppose a lot of podcasters say, "Where can I find you?" I suppose you're fairly active on LinkedIn. Is that something that um
Yeah, look, I'm always happy to chat to players, to parents, whatever stage of their career they're in.
yeah,
But yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search my name, Marco Pollecoff. Same on Instagram. But yeah, always happy to speak to players. I'm not. Yeah, I'm always open to speaking to players. I think it's if I can help in any way. If I can help one player off the back of this, then fantastic. And yeah, if there are players interested in opportunities abroad, then that's definitely an area that for me and my agency business, I'm very keen on exploring more of, because having seen the success that you had abroad, and a number of my clients have at the moment, I would love to help more players move to the likes of France and Italy, because there are opportunities out there. And that's just, yeah, the way I'd like to go.
yeah.